Hello and welcome to the TCS podcast, where we're dedicated to helping you achieve extraordinary growth and success by supplying you with the tools, resources, and support necessary to not only build profitable businesses, but to create a lasting impact on your families, companies, and communities. I'm Eric Guy, Director of Learning Development at TCS. Joining me today, very special guest from just outside Chicago. See if I get your name right. We went over this a couple of times, but see if I can do this. Jeanguenat. He's the Vice President of the American Rental Association, works in the equipment segment, workforce development and analytics. We're going to get in today to a really good discussion about rental versus ownership. I think you have a lot of great points for especially for our members, John. But welcome to the show.
Well, hey, thanks a lot, Eric. It's great to be here, and look forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, so I don't butcher it up too much. I was going to go over your background, but can you go over your background because you've got some pretty good experience and knowledge in what we're going to be talking about today, and I don't want to blow that. So would you do the honors?
So, as Eric said, I am currently the Vice President of the equipment segment for the American Rental Association, which is the largest equipment and event rental trade association in the world, but we're focused on the United States and Canada. We have about 6,000 members that are in the equipment and event rental space. And we provide a variety of services to our members, including our annual trade show, the ARA show, which will be in Orlando in 2026, as well as a number of insurance and education and other member benefits. And my background is in the equipment rental business side. I served as the president for Rental Max here in the Chicagoland area. We had 10 locations serving Chicago, Northwest Indiana, and Madison, Wisconsin. And I was there from 2018 until 2024 when our company was acquired by Sunbelt Rentals, one of the large national rental companies in the industry. So I've been in the rental business since 2018. I've loved every minute of it. I've learned a lot. It's given me the opportunity to get to know and learn from a lot of contractors, especially in the Chicagoland space. We were very active in a lot of the contractor associations here in Chicago. And I really, appreciated the relationships that we built in the business at Rental Max with contractors, and just learned a lot over the years in terms of better ways to make sure that as a company and now in my role at ARA as an industry, how we're continuing to evolve and adapt to better serve the contractor market, which makes up a significant amount of the customer base for equipment rental companies. So
Absolutely,
Eric, I'll let you take it from there. Thank you.
Yeah, so obviously you know them, and thank you for that. I would have butchered that, but thank you for doing that, and then that leads to kind of what we want to talk about today with you, John, is just how all of this relates to contractors, especially for our team here at TCS. From your vantage point, what are some of the key economic pressures that you think contractors are facing, right now with everything going on?
Sure. So, I think first and foremost, we talk about uncertainty in the market and what that's doing to local construction markets and what that means for contractors. So, at ARA, and again, speaking kind of specifically about the equipment segment, we have really tried to, work and support our members on what's happening in the economy for rental equipment, and I think that's part of the bigger picture of, what's happening in the construction market, because again, the construction market and contractors are a primary customer base for, our members. And so I think that uncertainty is really making for a volatile situation so far this year. And I think that has, delayed or stopped a significant amount of projects. And it's also, I think created this, it's kind of changed the decision-making process, when you talk about, how you're sourcing equipment for the jobs that you need, and, and what kind of investments you want to make in your business right now. I think it's a lot riskier to make big investments, in your business from an equipment standpoint right now than it was, say, 2 years ago. And so I would say that, the rental market is certainly focused on, serving a need there for contractors in this type of a market.
Yeah, like what, and that kind of segues to the next question I had for you. What are the trends you're seeing in rental versus ownership right now? You kind of alluded to it, but
So anytime there's been market uncertainty, and so let's kind of look back to that 2008, 2009 Great Recession period, look at, the pandemic, start of the pandemic, 2020, 2021, and even now to start 2025. Rental as a percentage of the total equipment market in the US and Canada has always grown during those times. So, if you looked back 25 years ago, about 40% of the equipment in the marketplace was rented. And, our latest estimates now are closer to 60% of equipment in the
wow.
marketplace is rented. And so I think that what happens is, as there is uncertainty in the market, more contractors are, trying rental or expanding, their rental position compared to ownership. And, I think that they like what they're getting out of that rental experience. And so we are seeing rental as an equipment solution continuing to grow in the United States and Canada. I would say that we're still, as a percentage, a little bit behind where equipment rental is, say, in Europe, where equipment rental may make up more than 70% of of the equipment in the
Wow.
marketplace. So we're continuing to see that trend up, and I think that we will continue to see that trend up, just based on what we're seeing so far this year.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I guess one of the things that at least we hear here at TCS is, where does my strategy need to be? How do I need to be thinking about this, right? So walk us through like those core differences and what the advice you would give to contractors in their strategy between like renting and owning their equipment.
So, it is, I think there are some key points here, and one to consider is the upfront cost. To go and purchase equipment, to invest in, what's really a capital intensive, part of running a business, especially growing a business, is, to go out and purchase equipment, there's a pretty significant upfront cost. And, I think you have to look at how much are you going to utilize that piece of equipment? What does the pipeline look like for, for projects that piece of equipment will be used? And what's the investment? It can be a better long-term investment to purchase a piece of equipment, because, you own it, you have the ability to, depreciation can be beneficial from a financial standpoint. And, and you have that piece of equipment that you could eventually sell at some time in its life. However, you are tying up a lot of cash into that equipment, if you're purchasing it. And so I think where equipment rental comes in is it offers a more flexible solution where there isn't that upfront cash outlay. It allows for businesses, especially contractors of all sizes, really to to invest that cash in other places in the business. Some of the parts that maybe contractors don't always think about is just what is the total cost of ownership of a piece of equipment. And so you look at needs like maintenance. Do you have someone within your company that's going to maintain the equipment, or are you getting that type of service from the dealer that you're purchasing it from? If you rent equipment, the equipment rental company in almost all cases is providing maintenance support. Transportation is another one. So do you have the vehicles and the people to transport that equipment? Do you want your team spending time in those areas, or would you prefer to have that piece of equipment delivered to where you need it for the job? Doesn't take your team's time, and then it's picked up at the end of your rental term. Storage for equipment. If you own equipment, you have to have a place to keep it when it's not being used, and so that's another area where the rental company, I think, can provide support. Again, you have the equipment when and where you need it, but you don't have to find a place to store it when it's not being used. And and I think that those are some of the maybe hidden benefits of renting, versus owning a piece of equipment. And the other, I mean, I think probably more obvious one is just, based on how much you're utilizing a piece of equipment. If it's not going to be utilized, a significant percentage of the time, then you're probably tying up more cash into that equipment than you need to, because renting gives you the flexibility again to have it when you need it, but then pivot, and maybe there's other, maybe you have a variety of equipment needs, and rental can serve that purpose for shorter term usage, where your investment over the course of a year or multi-year is not the same when you're renting versus purchasing that equipment.
Yeah, well, that was my you just kind of answered my next question there. Like, are there any other hidden costs that especially contractors might overlook when it comes to ownership that you didn't go over?
I think I think you could almost sum it up and say that it's time and it's money, right? And I think that some of the hidden costs are the additional time that it takes to to own that piece of equipment, especially if it's not being utilized, and then money that you're tying up into those assets that when you're renting, it's just a much easier and more flexible solution from a cost standpoint.
I have another question. It's really not on my outline, but I was wondering, are there like, because we have different size companies even inside our community here, is it more advantageous with different size companies, or is it across the board where I should be thinking about rental versus ownership? Do you see any correlation there?
I would say that maybe I would say that it can be beneficial, and it is beneficial to contractors of all sizes. I think that maybe regardless of size, if contractors are specializing in a certain area and they're consistently using the same pieces of equipment, I think that in those cases it probably makes more sense to purchase. But regardless of size, I would say that rental plays a key role in in general contractors or contractors that are working on a variety of projects that have a variety of equipment uses and needs. I think for smaller contractors, I think that not having to tie up that capital
Right.
in equipment, and especially if there's an interest in growth, then rental provides a great option. You can build that rental cost into your project cost that
Mm-hmm.
you're charging your customer, and it just allows you, I think, to build that cash flow as opposed to having to pay for that equipment consistently, and especially upfront.
Yeah. So with that in mind, we're talking about rental. What are some of the common misconceptions about rental especially that you hear from contractors?
Sure. I would say that some misconceptions may be, slow service, or maybe the quality of the equipment is not the same as if you're buying equipment new. And I think that of the utmost importance to contractors is just the value of time, making sure that
Mm-hmm.
when equipment is there on the job site, number one, it's there on time. Number two, it works to get the job done that you need to. You're investing in people to be there to do the job. And if that equipment isn't working, then you're paying people to not to stand around and not work the way that you need
Right.
them to keep a job moving forward. And so I think the service element is a key part of that. And and that's an area that when I was working in the business with our team, we really stressed is that part of our business, and using that part, using service as a major benefit for
Mm-hmm.
contractors. And then, equipment quality and equipment operation, being, a close second to that, and making sure that equipment is maintained and equipment is serviced prior to it going out on rent. And I think that maybe in the past that's been a bigger concern for contractors with rental equipment. But I think as technology has changed, I think as for example, ARA provides a number of services to our members, from an education standpoint and a training standpoint, to try to make sure that equipment rental companies are focused on, the areas that matter most to their customers, and contractors, again, make up a big part of that. So I think that the equipment quality and the customer experience continues to improve and continues to be a major focus for rental businesses.
Yeah, and I would assume that's why you're seeing that uptick in usage with rental equipment that you mentioned earlier.
Yes, and I would say, especially in North America and the U.S., there seems to be, just not just with equipment, but everybody really, we all like to own, things, right?
Right.
There's probably a bias towards ownership um, here, compared to, say, maybe in Europe. And I think what what contractors have found over the years is, if they've tried rental just kind of out of necessity, they like the experience that
Mm-hmm.
they've received.
Let's talk RTO and RPO. Okay. So for our audience who may not be familiar with it, can you kind of break down rent to own and rental purchase options for folks?
For sure. So these are two options that, a lot of people look at as one and the same, but I think there are some slight differences, and
Mm-hmm.
you probably see these more with dealerships than anything. So equipment dealers, offering rent to own, agreements or rental purchase options as, alternatives to say buying a piece of equipment or like a pure rent to rent. And I think what these do, so rent to own is going to be probably a more structured agreement. And it may be structured in a way where, there's a commitment for the contractor to purchase that piece of equipment, at a certain time period or after a certain time period. So there's less upfront cost. So that's a benefit versus,
Mm-hmm.
say, purchasing that piece of equipment from day one. You have the flexibility to, to use that equipment while you're essentially renting it. And then, at some date, usually it's 12 months, 24 months, maybe 36 months, you're committing to purchasing that equipment at that time. A rental purchase option, is similar, but maybe there's not the same commitment to purchase that equipment at the outset of the agreement. There's an option to purchase that piece of equipment. So again, you're getting the same benefit in that, you're essentially renting it at the outset, but then,
Mm-hmm.
down the road, you're doing that knowing that, some of what you're paying in rental rates or rental fees, is going toward the purchase of that piece of equipment. And so the two slightly different options, that again, you're probably seeing more from dealers than your kind of standard, rent to rent equipment rental companies. But I think that those options, especially during uncertain times, are offering, some benefits to contractors.
Yeah. Are there any like non-obvious specific benefits that versus to kind of rent to own versus just rent to rent that you would advise contractors to kind of watch out for?
So I think that, some of the benefits are, you get the opportunity to use that piece of equipment, again, as a rental. Maybe it's a model that you're not currently using in your fleet or don't have in your fleet.
Mm-hmm.
And so, without going and purchasing a new model, new piece of equipment, maybe a new manufacturer, you have the opportunity to essentially try it out as part of a rental before you purchase it. And so, I look at that as, maybe one of the hidden benefits of, you know, a, a rent to own or an RPO. You have the opportunity to, maybe try out some of the latest equipment. So, newer models that, and maybe as an alternative to a straight rent to rent, you're starting with a brand new piece of equipment, at the beginning of the term. And so it gives you that kind of, experience before you commit to buying. And the other thing I would say is, you get a chance to find out how much you're actually utilizing that piece of equipment
That's a
before
good
you buy
point.
it. And I think that that's important, because, especially for, say, specialty type equipment, maybe you don't know exactly how much you're going to utilize that piece of equipment. So just the opportunity to try it out, before kind of try before you buy, I think is a benefit.
Um, Last question on this topic: are there any common pitfalls that you would warn our contractors of when they're kind of navigating these types of agreements?
So I would say, probably the biggest pitfall would be to not fully understand the agreement that you're signing at the beginning. So I think fully understanding the terms of that agreement, I think is so important. What are you committing to up front? I would say, who's responsible for maintenance while that equipment is still in the rental part of the, rent to own or rental purchase option. And, and how do those payments that you're making during the rental period impact or kind of benefit you toward that purchase, either option or commitment. So I would say that those are that would be what I would highlight, is just fully understanding what your costs are and what you're committing to, and also comparing that to a rent to rent alternative. So how does that rent to own or RPO benefit you, compared to the flexibility that you get from a pure rental?
Good stuff. You ready for the rapid fire questions?
Yeah,
I got 5 or 6 of these for you.
Absolutely.
All right. I always like this segment. Keeps people on their toes. But okay, John, here we go. First thing you rented in your career.
So the first thing I rented, and it was even before I came into the equipment rental industry, but I rented a stump grinder to get rid of some foliage and bushes in our backyard that when we lived in Indiana.
Favorite leadership book or podcast right now?
So favorite leadership book is How to Be a Great Boss, which is by Gino Wickman and Renee Bohr. It's associated with the EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System Library, and we implemented that at Rental Max and had a great experience with it. And actually, the author, Renee Bohr, or co-author, was our EOS implementer. So,
oh wow,
so
very
it felt
cool.
like we really got the first class treatment on on how to be a great boss.
Wonderful. Biggest mistake contractors make when choosing equipment?
I would say probably not asking enough questions, as it relates to the best equipment or even maybe the best attachments for a job. I think there are so many solutions now, and as equipment rental companies, we really focus on training around, helping customers choose the right piece of equipment for a job. I think it's easy to fall into the trap of, well, I used this piece of equipment before for the same job or a similar job. And as technology has changed, there may be a better solution for that job.
Very good. One piece of equipment you think is underrated?
So I would say, any piece of equipment that has the what I would call modern or most updated safety features. I think that safety is such an important part of the industry and for contractors out on the job site. I would just say that safety features on equipment are probably the most underrated.
Good answer. Best advice you've received in business?
So, best advice is the importance of building trust with either someone that you're working with or a customer, really from day one, to build that foundation of trust. And that, with that trust, you can do anything, just about anything. And without that trust, you really can't do anything. And, that customer is not going to be a customer for very long. So, just understanding the importance of that trust in those relationships.
Mm-hmm. And last one here, finish this sentence. If you want to grow in today's market, you need to.
I would say be proactive. I think that more than ever, to get business and to grow, you have to be proactive. And I think that starts with listening to your customer and coming up with solutions that work for that customer. Understanding that maybe there's not as many jobs to be had out there right now, but those customers, it probably, in the not too distant future are going to have an influx of work. And so I think being proactive and even if they're not buying right now, I would say, now is the time to be proactive, and again, just kind of build that foundation for the future.
Yeah, good advice. Before we leave, I know you're on LinkedIn. If anybody wants to reach out to you, especially from our community, is that okay?
Absolutely, I would welcome that. Love connecting with other professionals in the industry and talking rental. Anything that we can do to help or to clarify, would love to do that, and and talk about ways that the rental industry can continue to partner with and serve the contractor. Your wide network of professional contractors.
Very good. And thanks again for being on the show. Appreciate it. Lots of good tips here today, John. Really appreciate it.
Hey, thank you so much, Eric. I appreciate the opportunity and look forward to continuing the conversation in the future.
All right. Well, that's a wrap for today's episode of the TCS podcast, guys. Until next time, keep leading, keep growing, and keep winning. We'll see you next time.